Hey listeners, I have a thought for you. It is nothing new. You've heard me say it before. I believe it was season 3. It was one of my favorite taglines. I'm so pleased with myself. And I figured it's coming back. It's very applicable right now. If you have not signed up as a subscriber, my thought for you is you're the problem, not me. We have all these resources for you. We've got the bonus episodes. We've got the digest that's just phenomenal. And you're hesitating, and I don't know why. You don't need the help. You're your own coach. Like, you're going to just take yourself to the top because you don't need any extra help or resources. So if that's the case, you are the problem, not me. Okay, stop fooling around. Go sign up. It is February.
Woohoo! We survived January.
Well, you tell me, because somebody said, like, oh, the 73 days of January. I'm like, first of all, I'd never heard of that. Like, does January always feel long to everybody? I guess I missed that one. But to me, this January flew by. It was like the 17 days of January.
Like, what happened to the rest of them?
Yeah.
And well, it was a little wild in Texas because we had some fun weather that threw something. I felt like because of that weather that happened in the middle, which, by the way, we got amazing snow in Texas, which we never get. It was like January didn't start until after that.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that's why it felt shorter.
Perhaps. Anyway, here we are, February, and I'm ready to get back into some drama. And so when I asked you about what your clients, blah, 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 you brought up something that, thank God, of all the drama that has hit my shoulders, because I feel like I'm a drama magnet here, somehow I have evaded this.
I don't know how, but you have.
Is that the right word? Evaded? Eluded? Whatever. I've dodged it. Or if I haven't dodged it, it seems like I have. Like, yes. I've been unaware. Mm-hmm. So living in my sandbox, and I hope to stay there forever because I think this topic would put me over the edge. And so when you mentioned it, I was like, you actually have a client that's dealing with this? And apparently you have several.
Yeah.
So go ahead, ma'am.
Okay. So talk about drama, drugs in the workplace. And it's one of those things that it's a reality. And yet at the same time, when it hits, it surprises me every time. So I'll give a few examples of things that have come up over really this last month, which is shocking. But I do want to give examples because I think it's important for practice owners to know what could be happening that maybe they're even unaware of at this point. So 3 distinct examples that were potentially things that could have been caught maybe a little faster than they were caught. So the first example that I will give is...
Sorry, if I can interrupt here a minute. One thing would be, can we go over, I don't know what you think for the flow of this podcast, but I'd love to hear the examples. And then I'm hoping, can we talk about like you're saying, I'm assuming you're going to talk about signs that we could look for.
Yes.
But then what do we do about it? Are we going to dialogue some of that? Okay.
Definitely. Want to dialogue because we've got to, when you discover that there could be some drugs in the workplace, or when I'll qualify drugs, but things that would alter a person's performance in patient care, that once you recognize that, you have to take action. Like, there's no sitting back and let me observe this. There has to be action that's taken. So this is one of those categories. It's not worth just knowing about it. Like, you've got to be looking for the signs actively. As a provider, patient care, patient safety is your top priority. And so if there is a member of your team that is altered in some way by a substance, you've got to be on the lookout for that. So yes, we will talk about solutions as well. And all 3 of these had different solutions, by the way. So
my stomach's the bile is rising as we are talking right now.
It should be. This is intense areas. So the first one is a young lady on a team that honestly, I love this young lady. just my heart goes out to her for the struggle that she's going through, and you'll hear this tone. I view this very much. It's hard. Like, it's hard to see people addicted to things and unable to break a hard habit. There's a podcast that I listen to where I follow. It's called Hooked, by the way, on just Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcast. I would highly recommend a good follow-up to this episode is to go and listen to that. It follows the life of a very successful Boeing employee that ended up getting addicted through no fault of his own. Had an injury, the doctors prescribed pain meds. Next thing you know, he's addicted. It just brought a whole different perspective to how easy it is to get addicted to these substances. So this is a similar path for this one lady. And so we brought her onto the team, lots of potential, just a huge little positive bundle of energy. But we started picking up on signs that she was inconsistent. So she'd come in one day and she would have a certain person. One day she would be super energetic and positive, and then we would notice even throughout the day that she would become just distant or moody. And so we're like, oh, she's got some things going on in life. We normally qualify this as they're having a hard day or they're having a hard time. But there would be times that we would notice that even as we were talking to her, it was like she was there and present and responsive and all of that. But we're like, I don't know, there's something about her that seems like she's not here with us in the moment. Or she would have moments in her role that she would get extra jittery, like just almost like nervous, couldn't sit still, not really paying attention. And we're like, where is she?
So who was picking up on that? Like, is she an RDA?
RDA, yeah.
Okay.
And so, but it was not just, so the doctor was aware. It was more her coworkers that were starting to pick up on signs of like, is she okay? Like, she just seems, I don't know. And there was nothing, they couldn't quite put their finger on it. So the reason I describe this is I feel like when there's substance abuse on the team, it is not overt in your face. Like, I think we think about substance abuse and it's like, how can you not notice that? I think this is a very subtle thing that you're looking for. And again, on that Hooked podcast, I mean, he worked at Boeing and was fully doped up on heroin and would go and do his job.
That's crazy.
So when you think about that, you're like, okay, and he was in a position of leadership at Boeing. And so you're like, if somebody like that can go in and perform to a decent level enough that they're not firing him or he's not getting pulled in for behavior things, like, they're able to function. So you really are looking for just subtle signs that something's a little bit off. So the team was more or less taking note of this, and because again, she was a newer member on the team, and so I think we're a little extra critical with the newer members on the team, thank goodness, in this scenario. I think if she'd been there a really long time and then happened into substance abuse, the team probably would have made a lot of exceptions for her, like, oh, she's just going through a lot or whatever. So again, I say that to mean we have to really pay attention to these subtle cues. There was nothing overt about this particular lady that was concerning. It was just a lot of little things. Then there were two things that basically tipped the team over to say something, and the doctor's like, oh, wait a second, something's wrong. So the team started noticing foil in the bathroom. There'd be little pieces of foil, like in the toilet or like a little piece on the floor. And so you're like, well, what is that? I mean, what is that a sign of? It is very clearly a sign of drug use, by the way. So again, she apparently would have moments where she was going into the bathroom and using drugs on the property. Now, come to find out, we'll get through the story, but ultimately she was not doing it on the property. She was doing it at home, but was removing the evidence from home and putting it in her pocket and all of that, so that there was no evidence at home, and then she would run and go to the bathroom and it would happen to fall out of her pocket. So again, you're like, if I were a practice owner and walked in and saw a little piece of foil on my bathroom floor, I wouldn't think twice about it, which is why I mention it, because it's one of those little subtle cues. So the team started noticing that, and they're like, why is there oftentimes a little piece of foil in the bathroom?
It's so interesting that the little things the team picks up on.
Yeah. So they brought that concern to the doctor, and they were like, hey, we just wanted to make you aware that we're seeing little pieces of foil in the bathroom. There's some behavior things that we're kind of concerned about with this person. We just want you to be aware. So of course the doctor turns her eyes bright, and she's like, okay, let me take a closer look at this person. So during assisting, she would really pay attention to how did she seem? Does she seem present? She was establishing a lot more eye contact with the employee, just really trying to watch her closely. Because again, this is a big accusation. I think we've got to be really careful, and also we've got to be overly cautious. And so she just was really watching the employee. She said there was one day in particular that the employee was just, she was like, I couldn't put my finger on it, but she was just not present with me. She was assisting, extra jittery, couldn't really sit still. And she said, I asked for, I can't remember what piece of equipment she asked for, but when she handed the instrument over, she wasn't paying attention to the depth of it, and it whacked the patient on the face. Now, thankfully, the patient's not injured. It was a harmless instrument, but still, immediately, the doctor paused the treatment and said, hey, can you come with me? Subbed out. And at that moment, she was like, hey, can you handle sterilization and blah, blah, blah. And then the doctor just was like, she's not going to be inpatient here today. At the end of that day, she addressed the employee, which will come to how this was solved. So I want to tell the signs on this one. Subtle, very subtle. The second example is more overt. So this was also a new employee to the team. Interestingly enough, the examples that I'm going to share, 3 of them are new employees. So this was a new employee to the team. Came in with great promise, great potential. This was a hygienist, by the way. And the doctor described her as having a very unique personality. He was like, she's very unique. She's got her own little kind of vibe to her. And I was like, oh, it'll be interesting to meet this lady. Well, she was doing fine the first few days, and then like day 4, day 5, she came to work late, and they're like, oh, that's not a good sign. So there was no other concerns other than she arrived to work late. And they're like, okay, we'll have to address that. Day 6 of her employment, she continued to take frequent bathroom breaks, which again, you're like, who's even watching, right? But it was enough consistency that they're like, why does she keep going to the bathroom? And it would be when she had a patient in the chair. So she would seat the patient, take a quick bathroom break. And again, the doctor was telling me, I didn't even really notice anything until, because his office, thank goodness, is in the hallway that goes to the bathroom. And so he's like, finally, by afternoon, I'm like, wow, I've seen her go to the bathroom a lot today. And so finally, 3 o'clock, 3:30, she walked by, addressed him, said hello to him, and then he was like, okay, I'm going to take note of this. And he was like, she was in there for 10 minutes. And he was like, this is weird because her patient is in the chair. So she walks back out to go take care of the patient, and he immediately decides to go to the bathroom. He's just like, just something told me something's up. And he was like, it was an overwhelming smell of marijuana. So throughout the day, she had been taking these restroom breaks and smoking marijuana. So, again, we'll talk about what his solution to that was. That's example number 2, more in your face, overt. But even still, I think a very highly attuned doctor that was really paying attention to this new employee, and she still got to day 6. Now, he feels confident there was none of that was happening day 1 through 5. Day 6 is when it started. And thankfully, he caught her on the day that it started. So that was the next one, more overt and in your face. The other one, also new employee, just the team, again, the team is usually aware that something's off. The doctor is usually the last to know. So the team started becoming aware that each morning, in morning meeting, this lady would have trouble staying awake. She seemed really sleepy, very almost like lethargic in the morning. And so some of the team members became, I wouldn't say concerned, they're just like, what's going on with her? And so they would, they started like taking in signs and symptoms, so to speak. Then they started putting together the fact that she always smelled like alcohol in the mornings. And so finally at that point, once they're like, oh wait, we think she's coming in drunk, they brought it to the doctor's attention. Now, this was a few months of employment before people are, because you have this leeway for new employees. You're like, oh, they're,
You probably think you're the crazy one going, oh man, I thought I smelled something. Maybe, how dare I?
Yes. And so, again, took a few months. It's a completely different substance, right? So we've got a different substance in the first one. We've got marijuana in the second one. We've got the third one, alcohol. So 3 completely different types of substance abuse, which all manifested themselves very differently. And in each of those, except for really the marijuana one, the team was really the one that was picking up on symptoms. I'll throw out one more example because I forgot about this one before we started, which was a team member, a long time. It's the only long time team member that the team started noticing she was having a lot of health issues, a lot of just chronic pain type issues. And so anyway, they started watching to make sure. So they were very much on top of it because they noticed that she was going through a lot of health issues and were wanting to make sure that, substance abuse didn't become a part of that particular example. And so even that, as an example, would be, it may not be a new team member, but you're watching somebody that's going through, maybe they've gone through a divorce, maybe they've gone through a surgery that they're having trouble getting healed from, maybe they do have some kind of chronic pain. Tune your ears in on that and watch that person, because if you go and listen to the Hooked podcast, that is how a lot of substance abuse begins, is just they're going through some chronic pain, they're on pain medicines for a regular period of time, and then they can't do without it. So anyway, that's a situation to also be aware of. So those are 4 different examples. Let me pause and let you make any comments.
The bile is still rising. Yeah, man, that just sounds very intense. And as you've been talking, I've kind of been thinking back about some of my employees and potentially have I missed some signs, because certainly we do have lots of employees that, are paycheck to paycheck or are going through home life stuff. The one assistant I've kind of mentioned before that her husband was cheating on her, and the changes we started seeing in her, and you're right, coming late. And I don't think that there was ever, looking back on it, I don't think there was a dependency thing, or I don't think she was medicating or alcoholing or whatever, but I guess to me, I would have never even thought about watching out for that.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of things about, like, for dentists, the Professional Recovery Network. So I know, like, we are very susceptible, to all the stresses and everything that we're going through. But yeah, and even like the foil, I don't think the foil would have ever caught my eye. Like,
right.
That's so. Maybe I'm just in a bubble and in my own sandbox.
Well, I think there's really, it is not something we think about or want to think about, but even still, it's just not at the top of our mind. And, you know, I think back as I was listening to the Hooked podcast, I'm like, you know, you hear about this opioid crisis.
Well, all the things that we now as dentists have to do.
Yes.
So it's like in our face.
It's there, and yet we don't think of it in our own home.
Yeah.
With our team, it's not even crossing our mind. And I think that's where, if nothing else, I do hope this episode brings light to the fact that we need to think about it. It is more prevalent than we really think about, and the signs are often subtle, which I think is the scarier part of it. And I think in all of this, we've got patient safety at the top. These are altering. Like, these are things that would prevent an employee from being able to complete their job safely with that patient. So we cannot ignore this. We have to actually be able to look at the signs and address these things. So I would say one of the things that I always recommend, goes back to just documentation, I always recommend an office policy manual that gives you the right to random drug test. You need to have a signed document from every employee that allows you to randomly drug test somebody.
So it's funny you say that, because just the other day, my husband said something about like, well, would you be allowed to randomly drug test, or you should? And I was like, no, I think it's in our policy manual, and I think their onboarding paperwork, we have a separate form that says we drug test.
You got to have that. Because what you don't want to be is in a situation where you do suspect something and you have what do you do? Like, hey, Sally, I'm suspecting that you're using drugs. Like, you have to have some concrete way to prove that those things are in place, or altering them. Now, thankfully, with the first example that I shared, when the doctor did approach her about the signs, she went...
Okay, I'm going to need you to back up. What do you mean? So, like, yes, now they're seeing the foil, she's acting funny. So, did he talk to you first, or did he just say, hey, I'm going to pull her aside? When do you pull her aside? What are you asking her? Do you have a witness? Like, I just can't even imagine that conversation.
Yeah. So, it's a female doctor. She and I did talk about it. And, again, cannot express the amount of just admiration I have for this employee that's going through this. So oftentimes we think of substance abuse people in a way that they're criminal, you just think the worst person, and that is just not the case. And so the doctor had a really unique relationship with this particular employee, just a lot of shared identity type things. And so she and I decided that I'm going to not share I have to not share a little piece of this story just to protect this person. But there was a medical situation that came up kind of in the midst of all of this that kind of shined a big light on the fact that it would have been hard to explain this medical issue without some explanation. Like, she was going to have to say something. So the doctor used the medical scenario that happened with this employee and all of the signs. She used that as an opportunity to check in on her and go, fill me in. Like, color the picture for me, because I'm seeing all of this.
Was it just doc and employee? Were you there
It
too?
was.
Okay.
No, it was just doc and employee.
Because I would imagine you can't really pull in another employee as a witness in one of these.
Because of privacy.
Yeah.
Because of privacy is what we talked about. And again, I think there was a high trust factor with this employee. I think if we were worried about, lawsuits and this and that, we might have taken a different path, but it was a very benign conversation. It was just like, please tell me what's going on. Like, please fill in the gaps for me. And thankfully, this employee was very honest. I mean, clearly explained everything that had happened, has been happening, the path that she was walking. She was very overtly honest with that. which I do think is rare. I would not expect that from most people walking that path. So I think that's probably an exception to the rule. But because of that honesty, the doctor was able to line out a very clear plan for her.
Such as?
So in this particular case, this lady was already connected with a rehab program. She was actively going through rehab. She had, drug test results that she could provide to the doctor. She did admit that she had been, under the influence. She described how the foil got there, why the foil got there. She was able to describe all of that, and she said, I am already actively involved with this rehab facility. And so the doctor said, you have to understand the position I'm in, because patient safety has to come first. And yet I don't want to lose you as an employee. And I love this doctor for this, because she's like, who am I as a person to fire this person and just guarantee their lack of success in their recovery plan? Like, why would I do that? As a human being, I cannot do that. So she and this employee said, okay, obviously you can't be employed here right now. You need to take all of the steps to get the substances completely out of your system. I need to be able to see a 6-week track record of clean drug tests. And I need to have access to those in order for you to return to work. I want you to come back. You need to hear me say, I want you to come back. But I've got to protect my patients. So you would have to prove a clean drug test, which, by the way, she's already involved in this rehab program. They're already doing that. So it didn't require the doctor coordinating with a drug test facility. You can do that. But in this particular case, she was already involved. So the employee said, absolutely, I will do that. She said, I'm going to call today and make you, you can fully access all of my records at the rehab facility. I will go fill out that document today. And the doctor has been in full communication with her rehab officer, or whatever they call them. She has access to everything as if it was the patient. So this girl is in full transparency going, you can have access to everything. So to me, it's a win-win, because the employee has a chance. She has something to fight for. She's coming back to work. The doctor can prevent any kind of calamity happening because she has full access to the drug test. And so that person got clean, returned to work. Everything is good. Now, the doctor is on high alert. She's watching for any sign, any symptom. She's pretty much every other week checking in with the rehab officer. Is she showing up for her appointments? Is she, taking her medicine to help counteract the drug addiction, basically? So the doctor is doing her job of keeping her patients safe by this arrangement. And at the same time, she's able to give the employees stable employment. So I think it's just the best case scenario that can happen.
Can I argue with you here a minute?
Yes.
Because I agree with everything you've said, except when you were like, would she be like this heartless person to get this person out of her office? And I start going, I don't know, like, I don't want to be labeled as heartless. I didn't create this. You've put my patients in harm. I got to check in with your your rehab coordinator and check your drug tests and rah for you. Like, is that one more thing that I should, and if I don't, I'm not a good human being? Like, I just want to clarify that I don't know that I think if you opted to say, sorry, ma'am, I've got enough, like, so that I don't go start getting dependent on other substances because I've got to monitor this situation. I personally think, like, I think it's totally fair game, and you are not a horrible person if you were to say, I cannot support you. I think if it was me, it depends on the employee. It depends on whatever's going on in my world. But I think I would be more like, you know what? I'm going to give you 2 weeks of pay. Be on your way. Reapply in the future, or don't. Whatever.
Yeah. So the other examples, the 2 other ones that I mentioned, they are no longer employed with the doctor. So I agree with you 100%. There's going to be situations, I would say the bulk of them, you're going to be like, okay, I do not want to mess with this any further. The reason that one is so important is, what if it is your longtime employee that, man, they just went through a school of hard knocks. They had all kinds of health issues, a divorce, blah, blah, blah. You're going to want to support that person. And
I guess all I'm saying is, if you opted not to, I don't think you're wrong. I will not judge you if that is the case. Like,
yeah. I completely agree with you.
Yeah. I think it can be win-win. Like, now you got to start over and find a new employee, and how do we know that employee's not going to do what this person did? Like, I see that, yeah, life can happen to any of us, but I also don't think it's wrong to be like, peace.
Absolutely.
Out. I'm out.
Absolutely. And especially if you know you don't have the desire or the diligence to follow up and make sure that the safety of your patients continues to be top priority. Absolutely. There's an end at some point, and you got to figure out where that point is. So the second example that I gave was the marijuana in the bathroom example. So that was a very different scenario. New employee, very drug use on the premises during patient care. And so as soon as the doctor realized, like, oh my gosh, this bathroom reeks of marijuana, he pulled the hygienist out of her appointment that she was in and said, go ahead and go home for the day. And then followed that the next day with, your position has been terminated. You're not allowed to come back. So that one's a very different reality.
So did she argue that and go, that wasn't me, or you're picking on me because of the smell? Okay. She just got out of there.
She just left.
Okay. Do you imagine that would be what would happen in most cases?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. I think she got caught. She knew it. No rebuttal. No argument.
Okay.
No nothing. So I think when you are in that situation, it's a newer employee, we've already had some red flags, like, why are you coming to work late? And then directly involved in patient care. Even just the fact of leaving your patient for 10 minutes to go to the bathroom, like, I don't care if you're pooping every hour. Like, we can't have that going on long term. Like, patient care, that appointment is critical. So, but that was swift action. That was absolutely the right action. He and I dialogued about that before. He terminated her and was like, yes, this is the right path. This is not even worth trying to be, because that is bold in your face. Not just once, not just the beginning of the day, end of the day, every hour you're popping in there. Like, that's insane. So, she was immediately let go, and I think that was the right thing to do.
1,000%.
In that scenario. So, the third one was the alcohol use that the team became aware of. So, in this particular case, there is no, like, yes, he could have sent the employee, the first thing he has the documentation in place that he could send the employee to go, pee in a cup and see, or go test her alcohol level. But he was like, I think she's not happy in her position anyway. I think it could be a casual conversation about, hey, I only employ people that are passionate about dentistry and patient care. I don't see the passion with you. And he was like, I think that conversation alone will be enough to just, I think she'll walk. And she did. So he was able to avoid the whole implication of, are you showing up drunk?
So that never came up?
Never came up.
Okay.
Never came up. So it was the right move on multiple levels, because this was not an employee that the team was feeling good about. He was like, I don't think this is the right fit. She'd been there for a few months, but it was like, okay, we don't want to keep investing in this person.
So if at that point she were to file for unemployment, would it have been better for him to bring up the alcohol so he could have that to stand on? Or is it just not worth it? Like, let her file for unemployment. It was only a couple months. It's not going to be a ding. Like,
that's the approach I would take. Because to me, it's like, is it worth getting into Do we test her sobriety in the morning? Let's make sure we have the documentation for that. There's going to be a whole lot of drama. Might she get personally offended in the process? I feel like that would have been a messier departure. I would much rather, if he was going to end up having to fire her, I would have much rather him just fired her, assumed the risk of unemployment, and moved on his merry way. It would have been a cleaner
I think the ideal thing here would have been, which is kind of in retrospect, and it may or may not work out, but to me, it's like, you don't seem happy in your position. Do you want to just resign, and I'll give you a week of pay so you can find something else?
Yeah.
And then that way you avoid the unemployment thing altogether.
Mm-hmm.
Or if not, and she's going to go look for another job. Or if you are saying, let's part ways, so I guess this is a firing. I did have a colleague call me not too long ago, and it was an employee that did resign, but then she filed for unemployment. And he was thinking, like, he's a relatively new practice owner, and he was like, am I going to have to pay her like thousands a month until she finds a job? And I was like, oh, no. I don't know all the inners and outers. All I know is it's percentages you might pay.
Yeah.
You'll get a little ding. And I need to call him, because I think this latest, I got a tax thing, and I want to say, like, they charged me back like $36 or 63. It was something, I can't remember what combination it was, but she had worked with us for 2 years.
Yeah.
One of the ones we let go in the summer, and she filed for unemployment, and it was like my charge back because I gave her 2 weeks unemployment.
Right.
And then she got a job pretty quickly after.
Yeah. So
my ding was 63 or less. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah.
So, like, absolutely worth being on your way.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what you're saying. It's like, it's rather worth that than the mushroom cloud of everything else that could
all
hit.
the drama that can come out of that, and the cost, because if you're sending somebody to go be drug test or sobriety checked, it's like you're paying for that.
So a couple of questions on that. Like, would you advise, if it's like this where you're trying to weed out somebody, is it better to say everybody's getting a random test?
Absolutely. So you can't single out one person. So if you're suspecting drug use on your team, or I say drug use, substance abuse. By the way, I do want to just asterisk this here. That can be any mind-altering, mood-altering substance. So there was a person on one of my teams that was playing around with her meds, and something changed. Like, she was like Tasmanian devil type energy, and just couldn't stay focused, couldn't stop moving. And anyway, it was nothing substance. It was meds that she was not playing around with. She and her provider were trying to tweak some things around. So even that, like, making note of those things to the employee, like, hey, you seen this, or wow, this is, just being aware. But if you're going to ever drug test somebody on your team, or if you come to a point where you're like, ooh, I'm picking up on signs with Sally and they concern me, then you need to random drug test everybody. So you're not just like, hey, by the way, we random drug test here. Haven't done it in 2 years, but Sally, you're first up. And nobody else gets drug tests. Like, it needs to be maybe Sally and Susie. You guys are going to be the first ones that are. So we can't look like we're targeting a particular employee. So then I hate that, because that means an unfortunate cost for the practice. But what is the cost of practice safety, patient safety? Like, if we suspect something, we have to do what's right in that, which is random drug test everybody. That doesn't all have to be at the same time. That doesn't all have to be at the same day. You can kind of sprinkle it out through, the next couple months.
So then my last question that I know you're not going to answer, because I think it's going to be in the digest for subscribers, would be, how do I start this process?
Yeah.
Like, where am I looking for where we're going to drug test? Do I have, if I have never had them sign a consent form, not a consent form, but a whatever.
The office policy manual that gives permission.
Yeah, so both the office policy manual and our form. Like, how do I get started on this so that if I find myself in this situation, what am I doing? And we will have some resources for
And again, hopefully it doesn't hit anybody, but my guess is if you listen to the examples that were provided here, your eyes might even be opened up to, oh no, I might have somebody on my team. It's way more pervasive than you would think. So I would say, if nothing else, awaken your eyes to the possibility, start looking, be diligent in that, and then use the digest to get all the resources that you need.
Thanks for joining the conversation today. We hope that you are comforted in knowing that you are not alone, but we also hope that you're walking away with some really great tips and tricks to try in your practice. We value your feedback, so please take a few moments to rate and review the podcast. Finally, we want to make sure that we're covering the topics that matter to you. So track us down on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and let us know what topics you want us to cover. As always, please know that we are rooting for you today as you manage your dental drama.